In just 8 days, on Saturday, November 23rd, I will be hosting a 4.5-hour virtual convergence titled Roots of Resilience, an online gathering for cultivating depth and vitality in a time of uncertainty. This event will start at 10 a.m. Central Standard Guatemala time, and it will feature inspiring speakers such as Amanda Scott, Elena Natalia, Oak Mountain, and today's episode guest, Seth Kaufmann, who is the husband of last week's guest, Ganga Devi Braun. So be sure to revisit our insightful conversations in the show archives as we prepare for this grounded gathering together. This event really serves as a fundraiser to launch a scholarship fund for individuals facing financial barriers to accessing alternative and holistic health services, including the threshold counseling that I offer for individuals and couples. Tickets are available in the show notes, and a replay option will be provided for everyone who purchase a ticket, and of course for those who are unable to attend live. And for the final week of ticket sales, we're offering a 2-for-1 deal. So it's truly an incredible deal and opportunity to support a grassroots initiative aimed at expanding access to essential holistic health services. If you have any questions or want to donate to the fund outside of the event, feel free to email me. My email is also in the show notes. Welcome to Wild Heart Revival, a gathering place for heartfelt conversations and stories as pathways of renewal and revival. I'm your host, Tay Tayari, and today's guest is Seth Kaufmann. We begin this episode by discussing the concept of the multidimensional self. Seth contrasts our authentic, soulful essence with what he calls the relative self, which is the persona we construct through our names, personalities, roles, and experiences. Our conversation also touches on healing, embodied awareness, and the role of empathy in remembering our innate wholeness. Seth shares his insights on the body's natural ability to keep us safe, how unconscious stress becomes trapped in our fascia, and how breath, touch, and awareness create the very foundation for somatic healing. We also explore the dynamics of trauma, shame, and the suppression of sexuality, how these unprocessed emotions manifest in the body and shape our relationships with ourselves and others. So this episode invites us to reconnect with and reclaim our wholeness, to honor the wisdom of our bodies, and live in deeper harmony with the natural rhythms of life. Seth Kaufmann is a multidimensional coach dedicated to helping his clients integrate and harmonize all aspects of their lives. With extensive expertise in physiology, sexology, somatics, and trauma-informed care, Seth empowers clients to transform their struggles into strengths. His holistic approach blends scientific principles with spiritual wisdom, guiding people to reclaim their past, stabilize their present, and thrive into their future. If you're new to the show, you might like to know that I'm a counseling psychologist with an online practice dedicated to supporting wanderers, wanderers, and edge walkers. If you're curious about how my personalized, individual, and couples threshold counseling could benefit you, I invite you to schedule a free insight call. This is a great opportunity for us to connect, explore our alignment, and see if we're a good fit to walk alongside each other during a pivotal time in your life. To learn more about my approach to counseling, including the guiding themes of the threshold work that I offer, and to schedule your free insight call, visit coyotecounsel.earth or send me an email. There are direct links in the show notes. For more content, including additional podcast episodes and my latest essays, follow that same link to my website. And if you haven't already, I encourage you to subscribe to Wild Heart Revival on your favorite podcast platform. Your likes, comments, ratings, and shares are not only deeply appreciated, but essential for nurturing the organic growth of these heartfelt conversations and stories. So thank you for those. Now, let's tenderly embrace all parts of ourselves with sensitivity, honesty, and sweetness as we offer a warm, slow welcome to our multidimensional guest for today, Seth Kaufmann. Okay, so I thought that a great place to start would be this concept, understanding, orientation of integrating the multidimensional self, the multidimensional aspects of self.
Beautiful.
So you speak of your work as harmonizing all aspects of a person's life. And you mentioned seeing the most integral transformations when people deepen their connection to something greater than themselves. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if we can start there and you can tell me more about this orientation that you have to wholeness and health and vitality.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I'm a firm believer that we are all whole, that every single one of us is already whole. And if anybody's ever held a newborn baby in their hands, they will know exactly what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously, in most cases, babies have names, but I'm talking about like a pre-named, brand new baby. That is as pure consciousness as you could get. Now, we could talk about past life traumas and what have you, but in the simplicity of this conversation, at least for now, we could get into, whatever, but that's the pure essence, and that's pure wholeness. And it resides inside of each and every being. You could think about the most evil, rottenest person you know, but that pure being is inside of them. Now, as soon as we get a name, right, that's what we call the relative self. So we're all this pure, Ganga Devi and I call it authentic self. A lot of people call it authentic self, soul, spirit. We always encourage the people we work with to, think of that baby analogy and think about what you want to call it. But we want to let people know is that is our wholeness, that is our birthright, that is what connects us to each and every being. We could get as woo with it as we want, or just kind of keep it pretty practical. So then we're given a name, right? So you're given a name, and that's what we call our relative self. And, it would be arrogant and wrong to think that we could all be these pure beings, just floating around, in this dimension and function. So we have a name, we have to differentiate. And that's the first thing that blocks or obstructs us from that pure self. And at first, no problems, right? We're a name, we're this being, and little by little, we start to develop more and more obstructions that disconnect us from that pure being inside of us. And these could be, subtle ambient traumas, and then obviously the major traumas. But either way, life itself, based on the social structures that we live in, the familial lack of communication and emotional intelligence, there's just so many reasons that we develop these obstructions, and it's for protection purposes. So on one hand, it's doing its job, right? The human biology mechanism that keeps us safe is doing its job, but what it's also doing, it's blocking us from that pure whole self inside of us. So then people start looking for it in all these external places. And this is where we get into different forms of substance abuse, as well as spiritual grandiosity and other things. We could talk about the different spectrums of what's disconnecting or what are we searching for, when the reality is it's just remembering the wholeness that resides inside of each and every person. It's developing empathy for our story, so we could go into our past, go into the thread, see where things got tangled, do the inner child work, do the reparenting, do the understanding of the social structures that we're all swimming in order to remember that pure being inside of us. And remembering, again, I talk about empathy in the sense of like, okay, think of your biggest enemy or the person that rubs you the wrongest way. Put yourself in their shoes. Even better, go into their parents' shoes. Think about their world, their life, how they got to be there. And you could see just how obstructed they are. That doesn't mean that pure soul is not inside of each and every being. And then we could get into, the physiology behind it, of how, I talked about that protection mechanism, but I don't know if you want me to keep going into those waters. But
whenever you want to go, I'm right with you.
I'm like, yeah, you queued me up there.
Yeah, it's a huge topic.
I'm like, this is my jam.
Yeah.
When I mentioned it's our protection mechanism, it's like, yeah, for survival purposes, our bodies are designed to keep us safe from threats.
Yeah.
And it's a universal, I don't want to say phenomenon, but a universal physiological mechanism that is in all humans. If a firecracker that you don't know goes off right behind you, every being on this planet, every human is going to do this right away. Yeah. This is that red light reflex. And it's what kept us safe from harm in a lot of situations. However, our brains today don't know the difference of a predator or nagging stressed about politics, stressed about money, work, and we get stuck in these states. So many people talk about like, oh, I'm sitting at a desk too long, and that's why my shoulders and my back. That's not necessarily wrong, and I encourage everybody to move their body regularly, but it's also that red light reflex that unconsciously most people are stuck in. And then when we get stuck in it, our fascia, which is radically under talked about in our world today, but it's, I just simply call it the connective tissue that is like the saran wrap from the top of our head to the soles of our feet that connects muscle, bone, tendons, ligaments. And the research coming out now, it's actually saying like that's the physical aspect of where consciousness and our subtle energy moves through. And we can look at the somatic nervous system and how it all runs through that, so we're talking about the physical and the subtle, understanding that these traumas that I talked about before, these blocks, these obstructions are all getting stuck here. We don't even realize how scared and stuck and in these states of survival that we're all in. Again, and I just say that to say that it's not just it's not just like a philosophical theory of this disconnection from ourself. It's a physiological, truly stuck in our bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when I see folks that have that like intense caving in of the shoulders, the first thing that I feel and think is like, oh, they're protecting their hearts, they're like, it's this kind of like trying to wrap around and armor their hearts. Exactly. Because then when you see people who are open through the chest, like, sure, there's folks who are maybe just trying to like pose and be like extra confident to look a certain way, but then there's folks who are just naturally more open in the chest. And does it have to do with their movement practice? Sure. But I think that is also deeply entwined with their connection to their heart and their connection to their skill and practice of being vulnerable and being open-hearted and being open-facing to the world and the challenges and the beauties and the devastation of the world. And the folks that I know some that are kind of in my family that have this intense closing of the shoulders, and they're also very closed off, even to ideas, not just emotional things, even to change of perception.
Change, period, right?
Change, period, right. Because the only way to meet change in a way in which you're going to be able to adapt and creatively respond and remain integral to who you know yourself to be and who you're becoming is to be open-hearted. Exactly. And the heart is the primary perception of the human body. And so when you're closing up like that through the fascia and through the structure of the body, it is physiological, but like you're saying, it has this deep psycho-spiritual process that's literally holding you back from being able to perceive greater truth of your reality. Yeah, exactly. Be touched by the living world and be changed by it.
Exactly. And it's a survival mechanism that people don't even realize they're unconsciously stuck in. They don't even, it's like they're not happy. They don't feel connected. They don't, and it's like, to me, it's just like so obvious in so many cases. And to your point about people kind of being heart open, and you mentioned like, it could just be their movement practice. if you don't mind, I'd love to just like jump in there, because in my tantra training, we really got into, you know, the depth of deep somatic healing, and a formula that we use for somatic healing is breath plus touch plus awareness is a formula for that somatic healing. And when I say somatic healing, I'm talking about to start moving those obstructions, those traumas, to start, and by trauma, I'm talking about any stuck or unexpressed events, emotions, energy, experiences, you know, all this. So all this, and conscious and unconscious, all that stuckness. So that breath plus touch plus awareness. And I bring this up because touch, especially for people with a lot of trauma, is too much for most people. Even, you know, they're even touch on themselves. And through my trauma is very based on, you know, sexual trauma, and so when touch is too much, it could be replaced with two other things. One of them is movement, and the other one is sound. And if you think about movement, sound, how it relates to touch, it's like, well, movement, it's you're touching, you know, the space, the air, the ether around you. Just the movement is having a lot of internal touch. About sound, we're talking about vibration. So when you mentioned a movement practice, as I'm going through this like formal tantra training, I'm having all these insights. And then one day I realized, I'm like, and I was a yoga teacher for decades now. It's like, oh, forget about what modality, what, you know, what dogma of yoga you practice. It's breath, it's movement, and it's awareness. And that's the formula for the healing. So whether people realize it or not, they're getting that deep healing. And I've heard and I've seen, you know, just so many people like, I don't know, I was in a good yoga flow, and next thing I know, I'm in tears, and things are moving through me. And it's like, yeah, that's it. You got a taste of those emotions coming to surface, and you're in flow to let them move, you know?
Yeah, and I've been thinking a lot lately of this distinction. I'd love to hear your take on this, of what I'm seeing as being a really important distinction of movement, as in I'm choosing to move in this specific way for specific reasons, versus being moved. Because so movement arises on Earth through dialogue with environment, right? So our entire physiology and the ability for our physiology to move is rooted in this deep, ancient dialogue with Earth, with environment. And what is Earth and environment? Well, it's other beings, it's elements, it's flows, it's forces, wind, these things. And if we're to take it back just to human evolution, what were our early ancestors doing 40,000 years ago? They were immediate return hunter-gatherers. They were completely involved in every micro movement of their environment because they had to be moved by it in order to survive.
Exactly. And they weren't storing the trauma, they were expressing it in real time like animals still do.
Right, right. So when we think about like today, 2024, you know, a yoga class, for example, people are like, they have their 9 to 5, they carve out time in their afternoon to make sure they get to their 60 to 90 minute vinyasa flow or whatever. And it's very structured. It's very, I'm showing up, I'm doing this thing, I'm doing it for my mental health, and I'm doing it for my physical health. And it's this kind of like, it's beautiful, right? I don't want to take anything away from it, but it's this kind of like you're forcing a movement for a specific outcome that is totally tied into your objectives and your goals and your drives, rather than being naturally moved by the wildness of your environment.
I love that so much.
How does that difference shift our ability to access deeper layers of ourself and our energy bodies and our emotions? You know,
that's beautiful. I mean, Thank you. First of all, I followed all of that, and it's like, yeah, absolutely. And anytime you're rigid or dogmatic, even with a movement practice, you're not going to get the full essence of what's available.
Yeah.
I let everybody, people, I mentioned when I first got into yoga 15 years ago, I was that rigid, dogmatic, Ashtanga vinyasa, just I was gonna be the best at it. I was gonna do handstand, it's all of it, just very, very Yang oriented. I did get into yin restorative, and that's really that's the way on the spectrum of where I am now. But this is why when people ask me like what I do, I'm like, I have dance parties throughout the day, with my family. I don't hesitate to I can't tell you, waiting, just how often I just like get up and move my hips and, make undulating motions with my entire body. Like just really just like constantly checking into, again, my brain works a little bit differently than most because of my background in physiology and my understanding of the human body. But like throughout the day, just from a seated position, I think of, my joints, my tendons, my ligaments, and making sure that every part of me gets some movement, and not in a rigid dogmatic way, just in a way where it feels kind of appropriate or intuitive. But to your point, I would my assumption would be, when you're in more of those fluid, connected to the elements, connected to the space around you types of movements, of course it's going to kind of bring you closer to that. Not only that like pure being inside of you, but it's also going to connect you into kind of the collective unconscious a lot more as well.
Yeah. And I've been thinking a lot about my spine lately, because I do a lot of work on the computer. I mean, all of my work is based on the computer these days, unfortunately. And so I'm sitting a lot, and I move like every day in some fashion. Same with you, I'm always taking breaks, and even just when I'm sitting, moving. But I've been thinking a lot more about my spine lately. And I heard someone, I'm forgetting his name now, but he was talking about the spine, and he was talking about the evolution of the spine. Wow. And how earliest prototypes, and then the beginnings and earliest stages of spinal development in our evolutionary history as creatures of Earth, is that our spine was like water. It was fluid. It was like liquid, You can imagine like a snake in water, and like, And today, think about how so many of us do sit so much, and we're driving and commuting, and how rigid our spines have become.
And that store trauma, in the lumbar area, just right. So much of it. Yeah. And
not just trauma, but just stuckness of energy, like any kind of energy, because your spine, like, it's literally your central axis of,
that's what I was going to say, is in my Tantra background, it's the central channel. It's where our consciousness is flowing, and it's I could talk about from a physiological perspective and from a more metaphysical perspective, but it is our life force. And
give us both.
Yeah, well, from a more physiological background, it's our central nervous system. It's our brain to our tail, and it's the superhighway for all human functioning. From a more automatic perspective, meaning the body functions that happen whether we think about it or not. It's all being run through that. I don't like to use supercomputer, but we could just call it. It's way beyond a supercomputer, but the universe that's within our central nervous system. Then obviously from a more parasympathetic way, and that's the work that we do of activating that parasympathetic for the rest and digest, for the healing to be able to happen. So from a more physiological standpoint, it's everything. It's what keeps everything functioning, period. From a more subtle energy perspective, it's where our, like I said, the central channel runs through that. And the way that I like to look at it is, so many people, especially in the West, talk about like the 7 chakras. And that's, and yes, there are, we could call it the 7 chakras, but there's at least 175 chakras throughout the body. And we define a chakra by an energy hub or wheel. And there's the nadi system. And the nadi system is every pore in your body is connected to an energy highway. The research coming out now, you could look at what's called the somatic nervous system, and you could look at the nadi system and just see the striking similarities of the two. It'll blow you away. So I bring up the nadis because every area within the body where a nadi intersects with one another is a chakra. It's a hub. It might be two intersections. However, the 7 that are common in the West and in my lineage of Tibetan Buddhism, we use a 5 elemental chakra system. But the 7 that most people are common, the common in the West, are where the most nadis intersect.
Nadis being, in case
nadis, nadis being thank you for asking, nadis being the channels that run throughout, like I said, it's connected from our central channel, from our CNS, our central nervous system, to every pore in our body has these subtle vessels, these subtle channels that run through us. Everywhere they overlap is a chakra. So throughout our entire body, there are smaller chakras, and then along our spine are bigger ones, and that's because it's where a majority of the functioning is happening. It's where the supercomputer is activated. So with that, I give you all of that just to say that the 5 major ones running on the central channel, and in my lineage of Tibetan Buddhism, and I'm always happy to talk about this with people, the central channel is not inside of the spine. It is slightly in front of the spine. And there are important reasons for that, which I'm happy to get into, but we don't have to. But I bring all this up because if you look at our endocrine system and you line up the 5 major chakras that we use in my lineage and the endocrine system, you'll see the parallels between them. So when I talk about stuck trauma, and again, trauma we define as energy, any unprocessed emotion, event, experience that isn't metabolized in the body, as those get stuck in our fascia, in our energy body, we aren't functioning as well in our nervous system. And our hormone system gets out of whack, and so just understanding how it's all connected on the physical and the subtle is just radically important and is not talked about enough.
Like you get, and I'm sure a lot of people can resonate with this, with feeling this. Even there's like a tangling that happens, when a traumatic event happens, or when something happens where you don't have the space or the resources or the support to allow that experience to really move you, so that you can express and let it flow through. It gets caught, and that caughtness leads to a tangled kind of expression. And that tangled expression, we can literally feel it. Like if you really feel into your body, you can see like, whoa, I feel knot. People use that word. I have a knot in my back or in my neck. It's like, what is that? That's a tangle of energy.
Exactly. And that's where, the fascia overlaps with these systems to create, a bigger system. And you said something that I lost the thread of there.
Okay, well, so I want to eventually get into maybe talking a bit about how to very simply approach like untangling these tangles, right? But before we go there, I'd like to talk about shame. I think that could be a really important thread to weave into this before we get into how to kind of navigate processing and moving through this kind of stuckness. So you describe living in a shame culture that disconnects us from our bodies and our authentic desires, creating cycles of disempowerment. So how are you seeing this shame culture manifesting in your own life or in others? Like how can the average person, this is where we can begin to unravel things, how can the average person most simply approach beginning to unravel these cycles and tangles that are connected to trauma, but also to shame. And then maybe we can move into like how that's connected to sexuality and self-worth, but starting with shame and entanglement with trauma.
Yeah, thank you. Such a great question, and it actually reminded me of the thread that I lost, and it's perfectly related to this. It's that you're absolutely right. When we check into our bodies, we could feel those things. I find, and I find most human beings are so disembodied. They're so disconnected from their body that for you and I to say that's like, oh yeah, that's obvious, right? Pause. That's these somatic tools we could check into. However, for a majority of the populace, that is such a foreign concept to them that they don't even realize how disconnected they are from their emotional body. And then we have behavior. We have like when a human being who's disconnected from self, right, from spirit, from that being, is in the world, we have defensive tools or behaviors or thoughts that we put up as a line of defense. So before I allow myself to actually feel anything, I'm going to intellectualize, I'm going to avoid, I'm going to strive for perfection. We're going to do all of these coping mechanisms and vices, right? Like toxic behaviors, instead of actually pausing and feeling the feels.
And is that just like an illiteracy thing? Like just never being...
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. I really think it's we don't know what we don't know. And we're living in a society, and we could get into the nuances of it's intentional, unintentional, but we do live in a society that doesn't prioritize, connecting with our emotions, with our feelings, and by being in a perpetual trauma response, we're gonna we're gonna do all the things that make the 1% the 1%. Beginning to shame, it's like so then even shame is known as more of there's more depth beneath the shame. That shame is even a protective mechanism to get into the deeper core emotions.
I love that. Tell us more.
Well, when people are like, I have anxiety, I have shame, there's actually a deeper layer there.
I agree.
But it's all we know. Again, we don't know what we don't know, so it's all we know. So guilt, shame, anxiety is actually an indicator for something deeper. Most people don't have this literacy to do, pause, breathe, all the somatic practices to drop in a little bit deeper, to understand what's beneath the shame, right? There's actual sadness there. There's anger. God, so many people live with resentment and don't even know it, and it's like, I'm resentful of the society that we're in, right? Like, but I want to come full circle to your question. It's like, we're conditioned from a young age that if what you do doesn't fit in with your familial community, your greater, your familiar structure, and then we could expand out, into more macro systems of living. But anything you do that doesn't fit into that narrative becomes shame. What you're not a good boy, you're now a bad boy, and then that shame, that feeling of unworthiness or not good enough, is where so much toxic behavior comes from. And again,
let's maybe like have a working definition of shame. Can we devise that right now?
I would say a deep feeling of unworthiness or not being good enough. Self-judgment. I'm curious what words come up for you.
I'm thinking like not fitting in. you know, like not feeling coherent with a group, like with our most familiar close group. And so then not feeling coherent with self because we need to feel safe and like we fit in with those closest to us.
Yeah.
And so then it makes me think, okay, so if you don't feel you fit in, then is it ultimately like a fear of that could kind of be like a survival fear, you know, like if I don't fit in, then like that's life or death because
Exactly.
this is my group, and if I don't fit in with them, then I'm kind of fucked, you know.
Yeah.
And
Well, then not to mention how many people are doing things that are I work with a lot of people across the spectrum of backgrounds, and a core theme in everybody's got things that they do that their partners don't know about, you know, and I simply call them devices. So when we're, you know, putting out this outward persona, and then when nobody's around, you know, we're on websites, chat rooms, apps, whatever, doing when we're in the shadow from a negative perspective, there's gonna like just that duality, I believe, produces shame.
Yeah.
And then when we're stuck in these shame cycles, we're just going to continue, you know, having a deep hatred for ourselves. And then that causing us to react you know, towards others. And it's again, it's this vicious cycle that we're all in, you know. And I know you mentioned like trauma and how trauma relates to it, but like we're all just ping-ponging off of each other from one trauma response or another.
Yeah. And I'm thinking like, so if you're acting out those shadow tendencies due to the shame that you are burdened by, that is holding you back from just being most honest about who you are and what you're up to and what you want, and that actually then, you know, you mentioned resentment. Like I see how that fuels resentment consciously or unconsciously, because there's a part of you that is frustrated that you've never been given what you think is the safety you need to come forth and bear yourself honestly. And so there's this, like you said, there's a survival tendency to kind of be held back and depressed and burdened by your shame in order to protect yourself. But there's got to be a frustration in that too, that's actually building the resentment.
The alcohol, the drug abuse, the domestic abuse, the physical, sexual abuse. And that's like weaving all these together. It's like, yeah, when people are stuck in these shame cycles, they're disconnected from that pure self, and they're not even going to realize the harm that they're perpetuating.
Yeah.
And it's subtle things. It's, you know, most Americans, you know, you're a boy, you wear blue, you drive trucks, you have guns, you know. So then for most people that go just outside of that simple narrative, they're starting, you know, then it's again, I mentioned like persona before, then it's all of the masks we're going to wear to fit in, and to your point, for survival.
Yeah.
But we don't even realize how disconnected we are.
So is it, I'm trying to think here, like how would we, and this is huge, right? But how would we define shame culture? And I'm wondering, is it like we have been defining it, but I'm wondering, is it a culture where, like you said, if you don't fit the mold, which is this very like mechanistic mold, right?
Yeah. Well,
because in the United States and Canada and most Western countries, children, as you started at the beginning of this conversation, you're put into a program to become somebody. And that somebody is a cog in the techno military industrial machine.
Right.
So if you don't fit that mold, and you actually purposely or intentionally try to go outside of it, does that automatically, it's like it automatically brings shame into your experience?
Well, it's such a paradox too, right? Because you said, what is shame culture? And I'm like, it's our culture.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, yeah, it's our culture. So it's we're damned if we do and damned if we don't.
Yeah.
However, when you develop the tools and the understanding, you know, like what we're talking about, we could start to understand that we can connect to our true selves. We can live our authentic life. We could bring light to our shadows. We could transcend and include all the ugly parts of ourselves into that whole being that we are, and not have to feel shameful about it. And in fact, we should feel the opposite. We should feel more connected to self and others. You know, we should feel more freer, more lighter. So it's interesting. It's I agree with you, but I also think when you're mindful of the culture, that's how we start to remove ourselves from the shame and feel the anger, feel the fear, feel the sadness in order to move through it.
Yeah. Like I'm kind of seeing how shame is actually maybe this very strange change agent for us.
I
So
think, yeah, I'm sorry.
go ahead. Well,
No,
okay.
no, but I do. I feel like anxiety, shame, guilt are data points.
Right.
You know?
And like how I'm thinking of it right now is if you start to break the mold and you start to ensoul your life for the uniqueness of who you are, that you're automatically, because of our culture, you're going to meet shame. Okay. So then in that way, shame is like a doorway into deeper layers of shame, but also deeper layers of yourself.
Exactly.
And it's like a change agent in that way.
Exactly. And the deeper we could connect to that pure essence inside, the less power those data points, you know, the shame and the anxiety will have, and the more, you know, free, not necessarily free, but the lighter and more connected we'll be.
Yeah. So then let's talk about how this connects to sexuality in particular, because I know that this is a really core pillar of your work at this time in your life. I think you said somewhere on your website, like that sexuality might be like the number one thing to attend to right now because it's so.
I deeply believe that. And when you talk about shame, it's like, I mean, what do we do sexually that isn't shameful in our culture? At least my upbringing and the people that I work with, it's like anything involving a penis or a vagina is being shamed.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
I'm sorry, I feel like I jumped in on
No,
you.
no, I want you to take it. I'll just
Connected,
say,
right? Yeah.
I'll just say that I agree with you. I think that, like, when I think about my life and my upbringing, my family wasn't even like really intense in that way. Like we weren't really religious, for example, but even still, so much just inherent like shame around sexuality that it's like it seems normal. But when you grow up and you mature and you start to get on the edges of things and you look back and you go, whoa, that shit is deep, and it's so entrenched.
And again, I don't want to get into like conspiratorial type thinking or anything like that, but again, have the major power holders, have they been wanting to disconnecting, have they wanted to disconnect us from our inherent powerful sexual energy? Did they know the power of a healthy integrated, Kundalini energy, and is that part of the system?
Does it disconnect us from it or control our sexuality?
Exactly.
Right?
And look what happens when you try to control something. It becomes out of control. And even now in like, not to get like into like politics, but it's like so many people have deep sexual desires, needs, fantasies, kinks, whatever you want to call it, that they're not integrating in a healthy way. My best friend is a gay man, and we could turn on Grindr in any city in the country, And I've been to some very conservative spots with them, and it's hundreds of men in a very small radius that are not gay men. That every single, so I don't want to get too in the weeds here, but what I'm trying to say is most people are, because of shame, because of society, because of culture, are not healthily embodying their sexual desires. So they suppress them, they let them out in toxic ways, and then they end up hating themselves and others. And when I brought up, like, not to get into politics before, but it's when they can't control themselves, they have to control others. I can't control my sexual urge. I can't control my cravings. So I need to block porn in my state.
Right.
I need to ban gay marriage because, and I've seen way too many examples of toxic, sexual connection. Not to mention, we could get into the statistics, and this is all connected, but because of the shame culture regarding sex and sexuality, that's where so much sexual abuse and violence comes in. Yeah. And then, and it's so heartbreaking, but I believe it's 6 out of every 10 women have some form of sexual abuse in their lives. And it's like 3 out of every 10 men. And that is vastly underreported.
Yeah. Right.
And it's even a spectrum, right? Like there's obviously like the majors, and then there's the minors, and we all have the more subtle, I talk about me. I'm very fortunate that I never experienced any form of sexual trauma from a physical standpoint. But, you mentioned like being a child, when I was little, I remember being in the bathtub, like touching myself, and my mother being like, it's going to fall off if you keep playing with it, and this is like to a toddler. But now as a father of a 2-year-old, I'm very mindful that when he's in the bathtub, that there's no shame. That's a part of your body, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, and not to get out of control with it, but to allow yourself to. So again, and my parents were incredibly progressive and open-minded people, but it was always, don't touch it. It's going to fall off. All these little jokes. So then you do develop unhealthy disconnection.
Yeah.
We're so disconnected from our own bodies.
Yeah.
Our own genitals. There's just so much disconnection. And then from a trauma perspective, it's like when there is a physical or subtle form of sexual abuse, sexual violence, we're either going to become frozen and disconnected. And I know a lot of people, that they're unconsciously disconnected, unconsciously in these frozen states, and don't understand when they're with their loving partner, a caring partner, they still freeze up at random points, and they still, or they still will just kind of disassociate to get it finished, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm on a tangent with no end.
There's so much, man. There's so much.
There's so much. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to emphasize, I think you mentioned it earlier, but I thought about it again when you shared being in the bathtub as a young one and what your mother would say. And it's like, that leads to out of control behavior. Exactly. Because if you aren't given the autonomy to learn yourself and your body, then you're never going to know where your own limits are, where your own deep feelings and edges are. And I think everyone has natural limits and edges that they carry into this life. But if they're never given the space and ideally the support to explore what that is for themselves, then it can just lead to all kinds of unconscious behaviors and
suppress. Right. What is suppressed will be expressed in one form or the other. That's just basic physics.
Yeah.
And it's going to be toxic, and it's not going to be good for the individual, the family, and the society.
It makes me think about it makes me think about when you hear about those preachers that spend their whole career telling gay people that they're going to hell and all these things, and then you find them in the back of like a gay club smoking crack.
bringing it all together, bringing just like weaving it all together. It's like, okay, so in the case that you're talking about, generally it's a young Catholic boy, who from birth is told that being gay is bad, it's wrong, it's shameful, it's all of these hard internal damnation if you love another member of the same sex as you.
Mm-hmm.
And then they are going to struggle their entire lives with that internalized hatred of themselves. They're going to, then puberty happens, and they're raging. So at a, so whatever. But then they're at an age where it's time to establish a career, and there's safety in abstinence in their perspective. But again, what is being suppressed is going to show up in other ways. And I mean, there's just $1 billion of paid legal charges against the Catholic Church. And to your point, one side of the political spectrum today wants to point fingers at trans people as groomers and predators and prey. When look at statistics, it's Republican politicians, it's people, high-ranking people in church, in government, in policing that are way more, caught with
So this goes back to this ties into what we were talking about earlier about rigidity, right? So the more rigid you are in your body, in your orientation, in your psyche, in your emotional capacities, in your ideascape, then the more vulnerable you are to being like cracked and fractured, and like you're not able to, because life is squiggly.
Oh, absolutely.
Like we're getting thrashed about by all these flows and forces, and if you're rigid, you're just going to crack up and break down at some point.
Without a doubt.
So we need fluidity, right?
We call it dynamic harmony.
Dynamic harmony, dynamic integrity.
Exactly.
Just an adherence to dynamism.
Exactly.
Which is life.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Life is dynamism. It's energy in motion, shifting, shaping.
It's not black and white. It's not binary. It's not a straight line. It's squiggly and fluid.
Yeah. So let's talk about how some folks can very simply begin to tend to any kind of rigidity that they might feel in their bodies or their emotional bodies, the shame, trauma that's stuck. Like, what are some of the most kind of fundamental, simple ways to begin gently, tenderly turning toward more fluid ways of navigating these inner experiences?
Yeah, well, as you know, I mean, it all starts with breath. Whenever I don't like to use the word homework, but when I leave a client with home play, I always say, hey, this is encouraged. The more you do these, meditations, writing prompts, we have many frameworks that we share. The more you do the intellectual work, the better.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, your only mandatory thing is to breathe, because it's truly the only thing we can't get away with not doing. However, most people in our culture don't think about pausing and taking an active, dynamic, expansive, cleansing breath. So the simplest thing is just taking moments throughout the day to pause and breathe. And we could get into, well, it should be a vagus nerve activating, parasympathetic, expanding breath, but simply just take mindful breaths throughout the day.
Yeah.
I recommend, we talked about the importance of spine. So from me, it's both physiological as well as metaphysical, of like pause. I like to tell people, take a big inhale in. As you breathe in, feel your spine lengthening, right? Feel your, just to your point, feel your heart opening, your chest expanding. breathing in, our spine's getting longer. Then I like to pause it on the top, right? So take a little pause. We're not exhaling yet. We're just holding the breath. And then I remind people just to squeeze your shoulder blades down and back. Take a little tuck of the chin. This goes into my Tantra practice just to get that central channel aligned. And then on your exhale, it's natural to exhale, kind of come back into this more constricted state. But I encourage people to keep that heart open. Exhale out and feel your strength, feel your power. Now, I also would recommend some pelvic floor holds along the way, but that maybe is a little bit too much. But either way, that's number one. Just thinking of your body and breathing in. Period. Nobody needs to there's no like right or wrong way here. That's just kind of how I like to think about it. But again, the more just breathing, connecting, letting go.
And what about the belly? Like, this is something that I've been focusing more on with myself and my clients is like we hold so much everywhere, like we've been talking about, in the spine, all throughout the body, the fascia, but the stomach, the amount of holding that we have as a culture, like when you see photos of indigenous people or people in traditional societies, you can see that there's this, like, they're strong, right, because of the way they live, so they have muscle and definition, but you can see that their stomach's extended because their stomach is relaxed. And oftentimes I notice in people in the cultures we've been raised in, there's this holding and there's this tightness. And I think about how much holding has happened. Like, if you've lived 30, 40 years, you'd think, well, you've maybe had 30, 35 years of holding in your stomach.
Exactly.
So with the breath, that this is an opportunity to actually learn how to soften with your breath.
Beautiful. And I mentioned like vagus nerve activating breath, but again, the vagus nerve from the brain to our stomach, even a little bit lower. So when that's rigid, which it is in most people, there's going to be, again, stuck energy, suppression. It's all just stuck right there. And again, we're just so disconnected. We don't even have language. Most people don't have the literacy to even understand that that's what's happening. But without a doubt, so when we think about, when obviously when you breathe in, you want to take big diaphragm, belly expansive breaths. And a beautiful thing about that as well is when our diaphragm is in full expansion, it actually puts a positive compression on our lumbar spine. So going back to my more like exercise science younger days, I can't tell you how many people with low back issues. Literally, ideally they'd pull their knees into chest, whether they're standing in a squat position or just laying on their back with their knees into the chest. But when you're taking big diaphragmatic breaths against the compression of your thighs, the volume that's being created is actually going to create a healthy tension in the lumbar spine, which will help bring alleviation. So just diaphragmatic breathing is going to help lumbar spine from a physical perspective. And then again, if we're connecting to, I always think, when I think of stomach people, I always think of my mother, who just doesn't have communication skills to express her emotions. Just was something that was taught to her. And I could get into family trauma and generational stuff, which is very prevalent to that story. But either way, she is a hold everything in person and had chronic stomach issues. And the simple act of bringing some breath to that is going to start moving not only the diaphragm and the back, but that stuck energy, those stuck emotions will start being moved as well. And again, that's where in some people without the literacy, it's going to turn into anxiety or maybe shame or other things will surface. But the more people are talking about these things, the more safe containers that there are for people to have a shame ladder instead of the normal spiral, the more all of that stuckness could get moving.
Yeah, every morning when I wake up, one of the first things I do is I do spinal waves, like cat-cow position, hands and knees, and I just get my spine awake because I'm so stiff from
Yeah.
sleeping,
Totally.
right? Get that spine awake, and then I get into a squat, like a yogi squat, right? Get my hips like down way below my knees, and I drink water in that position.
Oh,
But I
makes
also
sense.
breathe deep in that position.
Yeah.
And I love that you just brought attention to that, awareness to that, understanding of the lumbar in that position. So to me, that feels like a really simple, beautiful way to wake the body up, the hips, the pelvis, the lumbar, the whole spine, the
Exactly.
diaphragm, drinking
Exactly.
water.
Yeah. And it's that, and to your point that we're talking about before, it's like, it's not I can't tell people like, well, I'm going to start going to yoga. I'm like, going to a rigid 75-minute class once a week is so nothing to the 10-minute morning practice that, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that's definitely how I look at movement.
Yeah. Yeah. I love, yes, this is one of the main things that I don't like about this, how our culture is so drawn to programs and like yoga, for example. You go and there's postures, there's flows that are kind of always the same. There's alignment, right?
Yeah.
Like there's alignment's real, sure, but also kind of not. You know what I mean? So when you're in this frame where it's like always about alignment and you have to be perfectly aligned to what the yoga teacher thinks, again, it's this rigidity, this kind of adherence, bowing down to the structured nature of what it
Exactly.
means for you to be in a squiggly body that's completely unique, has
Exactly.
its own edges.
And every body is different.
That's
Right.
right.
I can't tell how many people are like, well, I can't touch my toes. And it's like, well, that person can only touch their toes because they have short femurs and long arms. Like there's nothing, flexibility is more about feeling safe in our bodies, right? The reason we're not flexible, again, it's our bodies protecting ourselves from harm, like truly. So again, I can't tell how many people are like, I can't touch my toes. And it's like, okay, go as far as you can comfortably, activate breath, activate intention. With every exhale, let yourself melt a little bit more. And 3, 4, 5 minutes of that, it's like, holy shit, it's like, yeah, our bodies are designed to protect us. Sometimes it's as simple as thanking our bodies for protecting us and allowing ourselves to drop in to the stretch, hold, the sauna, whatever, a little bit deeper. And I don't want to disparage anybody or make generalizations, but my background is, I have my master's in exercise physiology. I'm a certified strength and conditioning coach. I go to a gym and look at personal trainers. I go to yoga studio and look at yoga instructors. There is no governance in those fields. At least where I live, if you want to cut hair, do massage, do nails, there's some form of governance and a body that makes sure that people are qualified to be doing what they're doing. You could fuck up somebody's bangs, they're going to grow back. I've seen so many yoga instructors with this idea of alignment that have no idea how the human body actually functions, cause more harm than good. From a genuine place of wanting to help people,
right?
Just not knowing that by pressing somebody down without activating breath intention awareness, right, is causing more harm than good. Or having, perfect alignment when this person's coming to with some form of, chronic pain, discomfort, unease, so I could really go deep into that world.
Yeah, it's incredibly important. Yeah.
Concerning.
I'd love to bring up like maybe one or two more ways in which people can begin to tend to.
Thank you.
And
So in the work that I do as a multidimensional coach, it's like, yes, we have all of these somatic practices, and my master's is in physiology. It's all these things, but then like my coach brain comes on, and it's like, okay, well, who are you? Who are your values? What is your vision? I talked about persona before. What mask do you actually want to be wearing in the world? And the more people pause, do a little bit of reflecting on their values, their visions, their purpose. Purpose could be a weird word, but their value, their meaning, what brings them meaning, what makes them feel alive, what brings them joy, what brings them awe, where they don't even have words to describe it. Do more of that. But it's like, if you don't know, society is going to tell you whether you realize it or not.
Exactly.
So we're constantly being exposed to viewpoints that aren't our own. And if we don't know who we are at our core, the foundation that we're healing from, if we don't have that foundation, we're going to continuously be swept away by the new fad, or we're going to continuously trying to be fit into systems that aren't even in alignment with ourselves. But as I say, our core values become a funnel that we get to make decisions through. And we define integrity by being in alignment with our thoughts, our speech, our action. So when we know who we are, when we have a vision for the person we want to become, when we're living in integrity, meaning we are intentional with our thought, our speech, and our action, we're going to become more connected to that pure self. And the obstructions that have been blocking us, metaphysical and physical, are going to be subtly vanishing with every affirmation you make of who you are. As you reclaim yourself back from the powers.
Yeah, I like to think of core values too as like roots. And like, because your roots, like, we're traveling plants, kind of,
Absolutely.
Right. We root into specific environments for specific reasons at different times. And so your core values are your roots. And so you can root into an environment that maybe isn't the ideal environment, right? But your roots are intact, they're integral, they're connected to the pattern that you are choosing to live out, that you're here to live for. And so even if you're not in the most ideal environment, you're only going to absorb the nutrients that
the nourishment is going to get the nourishment.
And you leave the other stuff. You don't even touch it, because right? That's not who I am. And then of course, when you get into an environment where it really is aligned with your roots and the intelligence of your roots and your core values, then you're just going to absorb even more. You're going to get even more out of it.
And then when you're with your people, right? When you're with like-minded people who are in alignment with you, you can meet at those core values. You might have differences, but it's like the values are there, the greater purpose is there.
Yeah. And it allows you to, so using the tree metaphor, it allows you to branch out and explore, right? And if you've hung out around trees, you'll notice that sometimes branches die. Right? Because they had their exploration and they did what they needed to do, and now they die off and they're pruned naturally.
Exactly. This is tapping into Ganga Devi, my wife's world, but it's like, and then it's compost.
Yeah.
And then what comes from the foliage, right? More life.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love
yeah. And so if your roots aren't strong with intentional cultivation, then you're not going to be able to reach out and explore and experiment and bear fruit ultimately that you want to bear.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that.
Okay. There's so many pathways.
I know.
And I mean, we should, like, I would love to have another conversation with you, because I just feel like we brushed over so much that there's many layers to get into, right? But there is another topic that I wanted to bring into this. And so maybe this can be the way in which we move toward the ending of this particular conversation. And that is, you had an essay talking about spirals.
Yeah.
And in your exploration of the spiral as a metaphor for multidimensional living. You touch on the tension between the cyclical nature of growth and this kind of desire for linear progress.
Mm-hmm.
You also emphasize the importance of grounded expansion in another essay.
Yeah.
Where real growth, real regenerative growth can only really occur once we first stabilize.
Exactly. And when you're talking about the roots and the branches, it's like, yes, stabilize and expand. And that works from from a nervous system perspective to a more like practical perspective.
So how do you see these two concepts of cyclical growth and grounded expansion intersecting in our lives, and especially for those who might feel overwhelmed by the constant pressure to perform and achieve? And how can we begin to maybe recognize and address the patterns that hold us back from embracing this more integrated, grounded form of growth?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a beautiful question. I'm like, oh, I could sit with this for a while and kind of massage it. But what's coming alive in me right now, it's just that. In order to grow, in order to expand beyond our comfort zone, we first need to stabilize. And a lot of people talk about like contract and expand, but we find that like contraction could have some negative kind of connotations for people. So it's more of this idea of like stabilization. When I talk about nervous system, most people don't even realize that they're in a hyper aroused state or a hypo aroused state. So to get stabilized in our nervous system, when we're dysregulated, either too high or too low, parts of our bodies are shut down where no growth could happen. So the first thing is stabilization. And we stabilize through nervous system training, for lack of a better word, as well as I talked about our frameworks and meditations. It's you have to have a logical understanding in order to embody it deeper. So getting to that place of stabilization, having the vision for what you want to be expanding into, and then developing a strategy or game plan, as I would call it, to move into a new direction, recognizing when you're hitting a growth edge and having the tools to stabilize, move a little bit further, and at the same time, we could only receive what our nervous systems are able to receive. So by stabilizing ourselves, by expanding our range of tolerance, not from a woo-woo way, we're actually able to receive more abundance and more blessings. But I want to tie this into like the cyclical nature of things. So many people, I always think of the hero's journey, a lot of, or in brain fart. It doesn't matter right now. There's another book that I want to tie in here, but either way, so many people think they're, did some personal development, did some growth, and then it feels like they're back where they started. And the reality is, like you said, we're fluid, we're dynamic, we're moving. We're never back where we started. Just look at an ocean, right? You might be in the same spot, but everything's changed. So when I talk about the cyclical nature of growth, it's really important for people to understand that we're never back where we started. We're leveled up, we're evolved to a new line of development, you could call it, where we're maybe physically back to the same space, but we have all of this experience. We have all of the journey that we went on that we're now recalibrating from. And it's understanding that it's not a straight line of progress, nor is it a never-ending circle. When we're aware, when we're mindful, when we're stabilized and expanding through life, it becomes an upward moving spiral that is evolution.
Yeah, this idea of progress and linearity is such a mind virus. That is really not
ending treadmill.
It's not grounded in truth. You look at cosmos, you look at creation, you look at Earth, you look at one calendar year, so-called calendar year, and you see, wow, okay, we just went through all these seasons, and here I am back
Exactly.
in
Exactly.
another winter.
Yeah.
And so indigenous folks and traditional societies were, if you try to talk to them about this idea of linear progression, they'd laugh in your face. They wouldn't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Of course everything's a spiral. Of course everything comes back around so that you can go just a little bit more deeper into that specific thing, because that really matters, because it's not about getting to a destination, but learning that it's that as the story unfolds and spirals around itself, that it actually is growing in depth, that
Yes.
it's expanding in capacity for greater creative expression. And yeah.
Absolutely. And I love that you bring up like the seasonality of it too, right? It's like, yeah, as human beings, we are part of nature, and we move in cycles and rhythms. And I can't tell you how many people come to work with me and they're like, I want to do all these things. And it's like, slow down.
Yeah.
Let's actually look at this as the season of stabilization. Let's not try to do anything major. Let's
Yeah.
ground, let's be fall. Let's
Yeah.
let those branches fall, right? Let's
Mhm.
recalibrate. Let's be a little bit more bare. And when I say more bare, I'm saying like, let's release some of those layers that you think you are, in order to connect with your true self. So when spring comes, you're ready. Then we're going to go out there, so it's that,
Yeah.
that oscillation or that undulation of stabling and expanding, stabilizing, expanding. And again, understanding that we're never back to where we started. It's always, when you're living intentionally, it's from a higher self. And
Yeah.
a simple way of looking at that is like, pick up a book every other year and read it. And it's gonna, this just who you are over the years or whatever, you're gonna interpret it totally different. So
Yeah. 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 Really well said. Yeah. The phantom project of progress, like you said, is very much like this treadmill, forward facing, get there as fast as you can, because there's some inevitable destination that's going to be way better than the now moment.
my trauma response, before I dropped into like the depth of this work, was fight
Yeah.
and be a good boy and produce. The more I could
Yeah.
produce, the better I'll be.
Yeah.
And I'm really good at setting goals and crushing goals.
Right.
I literally grinded myself away.
Mm-hmm.
And it got to a point where I couldn't understand. I'm reaching these professional milestones, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm left feeling more empty than when I got there, and it's understanding that it is that treadmill. It'll never end. So, sometimes on the way to enlightenment, on the way to happiness, sometimes it's nice to take a break and just be happy. Just be
Yeah.
connected, just be.
Yeah.
Just be.
Bio Komalafe says, the times are urgent. Let us slow down.
Love that. Our family motto is slow and steady, we'll go far.
I
So
love that. So how are you? Let's finish this by share with us, like, how are you slowing down intentionally? What does
yeah,
that
well,
really look like?
being married to Ganga Devi is the easiest way to do that. Well, we have a 2-year-old. I don't know if you heard, he was just trying to get in the door here. And when about a week before he was born, we moved to a more rural part of Florida. So we live on a dirt road across the street from the spiritual community that Ganga was raised on. So our very existence is definitely a slowed down way of being. And just in general, again, like I used to be so addicted to saying I'm going to do something, not talking about it with anybody, just completely disconnecting myself from family, friends, connections, and just working so hard to get the shiny thing to show everybody.
Mm,
And in the process, I lost out on so much experience and so much of life. So I slow down now, again, we call it active states and open states. Active states are more like get shit done, produce, be efficient, more of that yang masculine energy. We try not to use gender. And then there's the open states, which is more of the yin energy, more the feminine energy. So when I use dynamic harmony in my coaching, I explain to people that we need a dynamic harmony of those active states and those open states. We can't always be these open vessels, and we can't always be these active vessels, nor should it be 50-50. It's not about this idea of balance. It's about this idea of knowing yourself, knowing these principles, and they're all in the frameworks that we've created, knowing these principles so you could realize, oh, okay, I'm in a season of stabilization. I'm probably going to be 70-30, 70 open, 30 active, right? But the 30 active part of it is going to be develop a strategy, again, a game plan of what, when I change seasons to more of a expansion, it's probably going to be a little bit more activated, So when we have these frameworks, we could start to move through life with more intentionality. So you're not grinding and hustling and burning yourself out like I did. Maybe you're going to have a window of a day, a week, maybe a month or so of getting shit done and producing, but you better be programming in some self-care. You better have your daily practices to keep you in that dynamic harmony. Instead of just go, 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 go. When I get the shiny thing, I'll be happy. And again, that's where, coming full circle, when we're connected to pure self, we don't need to go looking for the big shiny objects or the superficial, things. You're just, who you are, you're living in integrity with your true self. And for me, at least, that lets me chill out. That lets me sit in the garden with a book for a day and calling that a victory,
Yes. Yeah.
But for my logistical, analytical, want to make the world a better place through my work, through my essence, through my embodiment of what I teach, it requires active energy as well,
Yeah, there's a rhythmic, real true balance is rhythmic, right? Exactly. You can picture someone, or if you have yourself got on one of those highline straps, that you tie between trees, and you get up there and you balance and you realize, whoa, sometimes you're like 80% over there, and then and then maybe you come to like a 40, 60, 45, right? And so it's rhythmic, it's a dance, Exactly. And that means then, like a real good dance means that you're honoring the polarity, exactly. Right? You have to honor it. And what does honoring mean? It means you have to have some kind of reverence, respect, and sensitivity for what the polarity is asking of you.
Beautiful.
Right? And I wanted to emphasize this.
Yeah.
The times are urgent. Let us slow down.
Yeah.
He doesn't say, let me slow down.
Yeah.
Let us slow down. This is a joint project.
Yeah.
We need to slow down together.
Exactly.
We're not slowing down just so that I can be more productive next month.
Exactly.
I'm slowing down with you so that we can all find some kind of coherence and generativity to move forward together when the time comes.
Oh, absolutely beautiful. And that's exactly why and I say we as in Ganga Devi and I, and what we're building with our community space, our learning space, we like to say, this is not personal development. This is not self-improvement. That's part of the problem. It's collective development. It's collective improvement. That the paradox is, it has to start within.
Yeah.
It has to start the internal, but it has to include, the concentric circles of community that is life.
Yeah. Well, because let's be honest, what is internal if not embedded within the external, right?
Exactly.
You can't separate the two. They're completely entwined.
Exactly. And I'm somebody who comes from the self-improvement, life coach world, where it's like, we need to take personal responsibility and nobody's going to change the past, but we control it. It's like, but yes. And it is like the meta-modern part of me. It's like, yes. And we are affected by the people in our lives. And it's
that matters.
That paradox. Exactly.
Really matters.
Yeah. So it's like, yes, we need to take personal responsibility. So does every other being.
Yeah. So, Seth,
yes.
You're a part of this event coming up November 23rd. I'm going to get this conversation out in the coming days.
Awesome.
So that there's enough time for people to tune in. Would you want to maybe share a couple sentences of what you might be talking about there, and we can...
I'd love just to talk about how, I'm going to be talking about how our nervous system, our subtle energy body, our fascia, all the things that we talked about, how they're the key to building real depth of resiliency. And how we're not just resilient in body, we're not just resilient it's the integrated mind, body, spirit resilient. And I'll weave in some somatic practices and some embodiment things. So again, I'm a firm believer that the more we understand something logically, the deeper we could embody it, but they have to be together. They can't happen individually. So so we'll be talking about, the nervous system, how it's designed to protect us, but that design mechanism in today's hyper fast world is out of alignment. So using breath, using awareness, using some other practices to activate the nervous system, understand the protection mechanisms in order to be more stable, more grounded, so together we can move into the most beautiful future.
Yeah, great. Roots of Resilience tickets can be found in the show notes or reaching out to either of us. And your website will also be in the show notes. Is there anything else you want to invite people to check out?
I love talking to people. I've designed a life where I'm able to talk to people. So if you're curious about anything that we talked about, if you just want to have a conversation about anything, go on the website and book a discovery call. I am the kind of person that I get energized by dropping in and connecting with people. I mean, we just talked for 90 minutes and it feels like a second. This is what lights me up. So book a discovery call. No pressure. I'm not a salesman. That's a whole other conversation of how salespeople, even in the industries that we're in, are prying on people's nervous systems for sales. It's where I'm really, trying to figure out a way. But I just want to have conversations with people and people who care, So don't be shy to book a discovery call or DM me, like you said. I want to be in connection with people. And every discovery call that I have, I get off of it. I have my next Substack article. I have, an idea for a million things that I could. So I really encourage people to not be shy. I'd love to connect.
That's important, because so many people have this kind of holding back because they think that they might be sold something, right?
Absolutely.
But with an approach like you and I take, it's just no, actually, what matters before any of that is, how do we connect?
Exactly.
How do we connect? Just that, foundation.
Yeah.
And if anything feels interesting, you want to follow a thread in that connection, then we'll talk about that later. Exactly. But it's more just, if you're interested and you're curious, I am too. Totally. Let's chat about that.
Exactly. Exactly. It's beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful. And the depth of my work as a multidimensional coach, it covers, as we would call, it covers multiple dimensions of life. And we talk about dimensions from the internal, interpersonal, intergenerational. We talk about dimensions from the past, present, future, and we talk about dimensions from the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and sexual. Yeah. So my diverse background and experience in education could allow me to drop into any one of those dimensions. However, they're all what make us uniquely ourselves. And at some point, people come to me for my sexological work, and it's great, we're gonna talk about the physical body. It's all so I love meeting people where they're at, and then creating a custom journey for them to simply remember their wholeness.
Beautiful, brother. Thank you for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you, and I look forward to I and Ganga Devi look forward to many more.
Yeah. And so her conversation with her was just published today, so awesome. It'll be hers and then yours, and I love that. Yeah.
Well,
You two are wonderful, and I really look forward to more in the future as well.
Same. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.